everyone, welcome to our presentation about key research terms. Today, myself, Fatah Ulgun, Shivani, and Tim will explain some key research terms to you. So, we're going to talk about research ethics, conclusion validity, internal validity, construct validity, and external validity.
When talking about research ethics in the perspective of the researcher, it is actually referring to the level of appropriateness of your behavior towards the rights of those who become subject of your work or maybe at least are affected by it. So in this day and age, there are several committees and there's an institutional review board that is actually providing a code, an ethics code. And this ethics code is more serving as a guideline for researchers to conduct research in a responsible way. When it comes down to conducting research, it is actually important to realize that ethics play a role in all phases of research. And therefore, at all times, we must be very aware of the potential repercussions that come out of the choices that we make on our participants. Yeah, so giving you more of an example of the research ethics in literature, there's the article of Myers and Utzel, which is actually addressing a general ethical issue about the privacy of the participants and the maintenance of confidentiality of the data that is provided. So what was happening in the study is that the participants were actually asked quite risky questions about their job satisfaction, propensity to leave the organization and whatsoever. So you can imagine that those questions are actually quite risky to answer if you do not know what is happening with the data that is collected. So what they did is that the authors ensured the participants that everything was voluntary, that they understood what the purpose was of the study, and that could refuse to answer any questions at all times, and that, of course, their data is fully anonymously. Talking a little bit about a level of consent in this study is that you have three of them, which lack of consent is obviously that the participant does not know what is happening and does not know what is being done with the data. And one thing to tackle this problem is actually to test the participant on how much they know of the terms that they agreed on. Well, talking a little bit more on conclusion validity. So it actually is all boiling down to the degree to which conclusions you reach about the relationships in your data, whether they are reasonable or not. And there's an emphasis on relationships here and on the whether it is reasonable. And so there are actually two questions you have to ask yourself, and that is if there are two or more variables that can be associated with each other, and next to that is whether it is reasonable to actually conclude a relationship between them. So in conclusion validity, there are actually two threats that you can encounter, and that is type 1 error and type 2 error, in which type 1 error is actually concluding a relationship while in fact there isn't, and type 2 error is the other way around, while you conclude there is actually no relationship while in fact there is. Giving you more of an example of conclusion validity in the articles. The article of Yusu is actually suggesting a positive relationship between entrepreneurial self-efficacy and entrepreneurial intentions, while actually several moderators have been identified that they are suggesting that there's actually possible boundaries and conditions to that relationship. So what it is saying actually is that the relationship can be causal but not the other way around. So the first question you have to ask yourself is whether there is a relationship at all, and next to that is whether that relationship is a causal one, is a positive one. It would be a more deeper analysis about it.
To put it in simple words, internal validity is about whether the program you use in your research caused your observations or not. So the simple question we ask here is there a causal relationship between the two variables you are going to test in your research? To determine whether your internal validity is strong or weak, there are three criteria that we have to take into account. The first one is temporal precedence. That simply means that the cause has to come before the effect. The second one is covariation of the cause and effect, meaning that there should be some kind of correlation or relationship between the cause and effect. The third one is that there shouldn't be any other plausible explanations for the outcome you concluded. So to explain internal validity a bit more clear, I'm going to use the paper of Hsu et al., in which they examine the relationship between perceived person entrepreneurship fit and entrepreneurial intention and self-efficacy. So what we could see from their research is that if perceived person entrepreneurship fit is strong, the relationship between intention and self-efficacy is also strong. And on the other hand, if perceived person entrepreneurship fit is low, the entrepreneurial intention also tends to be low. So we could see some kind of a causal relationship between perceived person entrepreneurship fit and the intention. An important note also in this research is that a separate study was conducted to examine whether the proposed effects could withstand the influence of confounding variables in real life. We can see confounding variables as an extra variable you didn't take into account. And by doing so, they actually positively affected their internal validity. So seeing that there is a causal relationship between perceived person entrepreneurship fit and entrepreneurial intention, we can say that the internal validity of this paper is strong. The next validity type is construct validity. Construct validity is whether the measure or instrument you use in your research actually measured what you intended to measure. As you can also see in the picture underneath, it covers two grounds, the theory and the observation. The theory is about what you think, so the idea of your measure, and the observation is about what you do and what you actually observe. So the main question we ask here is, can we generalize to the constructs? So did we implement the program we intended to implement or not? There are two types of construct validity: translation validity and criterion related validity. Translation validity is about how well you translated the idea of your measure into its operationalization. The criterion related validity is to check the performance of your operationalization. So to explain construct validity a bit clearer, I'm going to use the paper of Peterson et al. As an example. In the paper, a meta-analysis was conducted on the antecedents and consequences of online trust based on 150 empirical studies. From these studies, we actually don't know what they intended to measure. So what we can conclude here is that the construct validity is not that strong. However, the outcome suggested that there was a significant relationship between online trust and selected antecedents and consequences. We can't for sure say that this was something they actually intended to measure in the 150 empirical studies. To improve that, researchers could do their own study instead of a meta-analysis using clearly defined constructs and multiple measures.
The next term we will discuss is external validity. Well, the official definition used by Trochen is the degree to which the conclusion in your study would hold for other persons in other places and at other times. So to understand external validity, two things need to be explained first. Well, the first thing is there's a general population, which means everyone that could participate in a research, and there's a sample, and the sample is a small part of the total population which will participate in the research. And a key question that should be asked is if a certain research is replicated at another place, or another time, with other people, uh, would the same results occur again? So let's look at two papers, and let's look at their external validity. First, let the paper of Myers and Utzel from 2003. Well, the main goal of this research was to develop a measure to measure organizational assimilation. Well, first of all, looking at this study, you can see that there are 342 employees in the second phase of this research, which is a quite big sample size, which is a plus. And nevertheless, the sample that has been taken is only from the south western part of the United States. Can it be said that this can be generalized back to the whole population? There we have some doubts. And furthermore, there's no mention of random sampling, neither from random assignments. So that's also a negative side of this research. When we look at Su et al., we can see that there's definitely a big sample. A sample of 500 students in test 1, 124 in the second test, and at the last test, 291 students participated. Nevertheless, again, in this research, the sample has been taken from the southeastern part of the United States. Again, can this be generalized back to the rest of the world? Thank you for watching our video and hope we've explained the research terms clearly to you.